Our ability to do trauma-informed care is partly influenced by our own skills and knowledge, by our learning about trauma, how it affects people, how it relates to their current symptoms, and how they can heal. However, our ability to do this work is also very strongly influenced by the systems around us, those being the system, the agency, the school, the place in which we work, and the system in which that is embedded, such as the child welfare system, the juvenile justice system, the education system, and how all these work together. So it is essential that we think about, what does trauma-informed care mean for a system? Well, we have to remember when we think about trauma-informed care that the whole movement started from clients who said that this system of helping us is not helping us. In fact, it's making us worse. And that clients were experiencing re-traumatization as they interacted with the helping system, whether that be with the police, with therapists, with hospitals, with schools, etc. The essence of the trauma-informed care movement is to be collaborative and to empower people to speak with their own voice about their own needs. Another reason that we want to spend time on thinking about systems is that many of us and many of the people we work with ourselves are trauma survivors. Sometimes that's what's brought us into the work. And so it's important that we be able to thrive within the system that we're working in. If not, how would we ever offer genuine, open relationships for our clients? A good program helps both the clients and the staff grow and change. That's the mark of a good program. So let's look at the agency first. SAMHSA, from the federal government, Substance Abuse Mental Health Association, has come up with a definition of what trauma-informed care is. And that is a program or an organization or system that realize how common trauma is, and especially how common it is in the client population, and understands that many of the symptoms that we see are related to early childhood trauma. So recognizes the signs of trauma in the symptoms that we are asked to treat. Also recognizing the signs of trauma in staff. And then responds to people, clients and staff, with skill, with knowledge, by understanding the brain and the body and how trauma affects people and what will help them. In other words, it's not enough to be nice. We have to respond with skill and knowledge. And then the system also avoids re-traumatizing the clients themselves. So the clients should not feel worse because they've interacted with the system. This could be a major thing like a restraint or involuntary hospitalization, but it could also be an attitude such as, here, you have an appointment Tuesday at 2, and the client says, but I work on Tuesdays. Oh, are you being resistant? That kind of an attitude is in itself re-traumatizing. So these are the signs of trauma-informed care. SAMHSA defines 6 key principles: that the clients and staff feel safe, and that how that safety is built is through trustworthiness and transparency, that there's peer support, that people get a chance to learn not just from experts, but from people who've had the same experiences. And there's a sense of collaboration and mutuality between the providers and the clients. It isn't one's the expert and one should just do as they're told. It's a mutual endeavor. And this is related to empowerment, to clients getting a say in their own treatment and how the agency runs, in decisions that are made. There's a mutual respect. People are helped to develop their own voice, both clients and staff, and that people have a choice. Both clients and staff can influence their experiences. Then, of course, that the agency is skillful about cultural, historical, and gender issues. And an important part of trauma-informed care is that wherever you start to implement it, it ends up affecting everything the agency does. So SAMHSA delineated these 10 areas that it will affect. Governance, leadership is crucial. Leadership can make or break an endeavor and needs to have a deep understanding of why they're trying to move towards trauma-informed care. And the policies have to be written down. The changes have to become policy. The physical environment. For example, one agency discovered when they did a survey of their clients' experience with intake that their clients didn't like having to sit on couches with other clients, and that they would have preferred individual chairs. So there's an aspect of the physical environment that could be easily changed. Lots of aspects to the physical environment, whether it's welcoming, whether there's pictures depicting all races, whether there's privacy, things like that. The engagement with the clients, the involvement, and that the agency doesn't just implement trauma-informed care in their own agency, but they work with other agencies and collaborate. Screening, assessment, and treatment is a big category. All clients are screened for trauma and that their treatment is specific to their needs. Training and workforce development, that people continue to be trained and to grow. That evaluation, progress monitoring, and quality assurance keep track of whether these things are really happening and whether they're sliding away. And financing, of course, is necessary to make all this happen. Sandra Bloom is a wonderful person who's written very interesting work, which I recommend to you someday when you can read again, about how organizations themselves can experience trauma. Organizations are living beings, and they can experience a trauma such as a client dying, a favored person suddenly leaving, a big change in the environment and what's expected of them. And when an agency experiences a trauma, it exhibits many of the same symptoms that a person does, such as black and white thinking, constant fear of danger, inability to relax. So paying attention to what has happened at the agency level, and are we talking about it? Are we processing it? Because everything like that that's happening is connected to our ability to deliver good care. When an organization has experienced trauma, they feel like they're under chronic stress, just like with a person, it leads to impaired emotion management and problem solving. So people become snappish, have difficulty being creative, don't feel safe, and don't trust each other. There's a sense of fear in the organization. People tend to isolate, pull away from each other, and decrease communication when they need it most. There's unresolved grief for all. And so one reaction to all these things is to become more controlling and silence dissent, decrease the voices that are heard, which is just the opposite of what you need. There could be increased aggression or an increased authoritarian approach. And all of these things together can lead to loss of meaning and burnout. So you might wonder what you do about it, and you could read Sandy's books to learn a lot more, but it's involved with talking about it, acknowledging it, and working to build up trust and communication. So here's some of the basic principles of trauma-informed care that apply to agencies. So the agency operates with the belief that everyone's doing the best they can. Every client, every parent, every staff member. Easy to say, hard to do. We understand people will act better if they're safer, if they're more connected, if they're happier. It isn't punishment that makes people act better. It isn't fear that makes people act better. It's kindness. It's love. It's feeling connected. And that's what will make a difference both to our staff and our client. Relationships are what cause change, what allow change to happen. We understand how neglect and abuse physically changes the person, and we use that knowledge in designing a key belief is that every single piece of communication is adaptive and a communication. Every single behavior, however bizarre, however unfortunate, however dangerous, is the person's best attempt to solve a problem, the best way they know how. So we try to understand the behavior before we attempt to change it. So we'd be, again, collaborative and responsive, with clients, respectful, and with each other. And then an important value is individualizing. Each person is different, and what we offer each person is to fit their needs, not to be the same as everyone else. Consistency is consistency in being fair to everyone by offering them what they need. So we're trying to be flexible and patient with clients and with each other. A lot of problems in treatment happen because we're in a hurry. We have 10 more people to deal with. We have paperwork to do. We want to go home. And so we push the situation and don't allow it to resolve. And in the long term, we need to be patient. And we have a lot of forces leading us to be less patient, like insurance companies telling us they're not going to pay anymore, or short-term programs and things like that. But if we're patient, we have more of a chance to create healing. And if we avoid causing more shame in our clients, we're very deliberate in figuring out the skills the clients need and teaching them deliberately and helping them speak their voice and their truth. It's the most important thing we can do is give this client a different experience of a human being, a person who is kind, who's trustworthy, who's compassionate. The client has not had very much experience with people like that, and by knowing this provider, they can get a sense that there is goodness in the world. And then another key part of trauma-informed care is that we understand that the work affects us as people, and that we take good care of ourselves and each other. We know about vicarious traumatization. We have fun. We have potlucks. We have recognition. We have time to talk about it. We take care of ourselves and each other. So the idea of trauma-informed care is to use that lens at every level. So certainly you'd want to understand a child's behavior by trying to figure out what problem they're solving. The same, though, applies to the family and to the worker, to understand what the worker is experiencing and how their job is affecting them. Also the supervisor, applying the same thoughts to the treatment program and the whole agency. In fact, we're trying to create a common language among all of us, and if we have several programs that refer between each other, we want a common language between them so the client will get the same philosophy and assumptions wherever in the agency they go. So here's an example of a staff that does not have a common language. One person saying their diagnosis, one person saying let's be consistent, maybe medication, maybe a behavior plan, should take responsibility for himself. This person, I think, is a quality control person who's saying, what if this kid disrupts? This guy says, I had to learn the hard way, and so does he. This person says, I'm not being able to keep this kid much longer. And I think this is a social worker saying, these kids have had hard lives. Instead, once we've had training, once we've talked, once we've developed a trauma-informed approach, everyone sees trauma at the heart of what's going on. Understand that the person has experienced trauma and doesn't trust us at first, needs to learn some skills, leads to decrease in shame, has to have times to develop their own strengths and interests, and that we have to support each other in this difficult work and have relationships with the client and each other. The administration is crucial, as I said previously, to making this work, because first of all, they have to find the resources, and they have to continuously push for this is the way we're going to be from now on. We are moving towards trauma-informed care, and they have to appreciate it and notice it whenever they find it. And if there's some chaos in the transition, they have to be able to get through that with people. Administration has to pay attention to what are they actually rewarding and noticing. If they speak to a staff about, oh, I'm glad you got that person under control, they're showing that it's control that matters. But if they say, that was so sweet how you were so kind to that client, then they're showing that that's what matters. The administrators influence things both in the macro ways and in the little subtle ways. So thinking about programs that you've been in, what sort of messages have you gotten from your administration about what really matters? Is what matters the most to get your paperwork done? Does that matter more than how you act towards the clients? An important thing here is that all staff are treaters. It's not just or even particularly the clinician that helps somebody change. Any staff can give a client an experience of a caring person. That can be the person on the desk, it can be a teacher, it can be a person in a cafeteria, it can be a maintenance person, it can be a direct care staff. Everyone has the opportunity to act in a compassionate, kind way towards clients and thus help them regain their faith in the world. The clinical work is important, but what really helps people change is the day-to-day moments of interaction, the little times in which you say, oh, tell me more, and which you remember what they're interested in, and which you play with them and have fun with them, and in which you act in a trustworthy way. So that there's a whole change process for an agency that's trying to become trauma-informed, and it has many steps of training, working with the administration, working with a task force, and using data to inform the process and celebrating success. So when an agency first starts to become trauma-informed, they worry that chaos will break out. They worry that without punishments, both the clients and the staff will go crazy and do terrible things. But actually, it's not punishments that keep people from doing bad things. It's relationships. Sometimes people say this is not the real world. These kids aren't going to find somebody to be not this nice to them in the real world. It's kind of interesting what a pessimistic view we have of the real world, because people are often nice to me in the real world. But this is also training camp, where if clients didn't need extra help, they wouldn't be with us in treatment. And we're there to teach them the skills so that when they have less supports, they'll be able to use their own skills. Sometimes people think we're saying that having experienced trauma is an excuse. So what do we mean by excuse? It means it's like it makes it okay. So this kid just hit a teacher. And we know they were badly beaten as a child. Does that make their hitting a teacher okay? No, it does not. And in fact, if we were to take that stance, we wouldn't help these kids, because it would just be another form of neglect, really, because they would not end up having a life worth living. Instead, the trauma is an explanation, and it helps us understand why a kid would do that, and it leads us to teaching the kid the skills that they need to not do it again. People sometimes think that trauma-informed care takes a lot of time, but it doesn't really take any more time than any other type of treatment. People say, what? You expect us to spend all that time talking to the kids? Better spend that time than this time restraining, or the time getting rid of kids and getting in new kids, or having staff turnover. So there's various other concerns. As I said, implementing this will affect all areas of an agency: the hiring, the supervision, the teams, intake, the behavior management, policies and procedures, adding sensory interventions and body-based practices, the way they work with families, and of course, the attention to vicarious trauma. And then, it could just spend all this time implementing trauma-informed care, and it's just as hard to sustain it as it was to implement it, because we live in a punitive world. We're also under-resourced. And so all of a sudden it can start slipping away, and people can become punitive again. So the main thing is to pay attention to that, to be noticing whether this trauma-informed care is still operative, and to notice if it starts to slip away, because you can do more to fix it more quickly if you notice it early. Lots of things push us back towards the punitive. Aside from our punitive world, we have cutbacks and diminishing resources. When we get clients with severe behaviors, it can make us scared, or clients with new behaviors we're not used to. When staff are hurt or are feeling hopeless, as I mentioned about system level trauma and external pressures, all these things that can push us towards the punitive. So we have to keep talking, notice the pressures, acknowledge them, and keep supporting each other in our new approach. So we've talked about the trauma-informed team and how essential it is, how we work together. An important part is to write down the new approach, put it in the philosophy, write down behavior management approaches, when to call the police, ideas about when do you discharge someone, anything about what you do that you can write down, because you can rely on individuals to implement a new way, but when those individual leaves, you're very vulnerable unless you've written it down and gotten it into the fabric of the organization. And also consider an explanation for parents and also for other people like DCF workers, because parents have been trained by professionals to expect a very punitive approach to their kid, and they may at first find it very weird if you're not doing that. So have something written to start to come. And then we have to realize that our staff are experiencing a lot of stress. We've talked about vicarious traumatization, and also it's hard to work in the system we work in because it's a very inadequate system. So we're at times forced to make moral decisions that are really a struggle, like discharging someone to a place where we know they're not safe, or discharging them too early. We've experienced grief as we lose kids that we've gotten very involved with, or as we lose co-workers. And we have to deal with the fact that the system is not what it should be for our clients. So our stress is influenced by both the nature of the work we're doing, the nature of the clients we're seeing, and then our own lives. What we sometimes have stress both at work and at home, and what support systems and healthy habits do we have at home. So there's lots of ways we can help with the stressors, and we've talked about some of them, and here's a few more. We've talked about creating social connections. One that's important too, both for clients and staff, is having a voice. In what way can we give our staff more choice and voice within their environment? Some might be work hours, having flexible hours. All of these depend on what the job is. Being able to decorate your own space, being able to introduce a new treatment method, include your own interest in the work, like if you yourself were interested in meditation, can you introduce that to the clients? Giving people new things to learn, like having an intern or becoming a trainer, or any way that they feel that they're growing, and giving people opportunities to interact with a larger community. Also, staff having a voice, feeling like they can make a difference to how services are provided in agency policies, in individual treatment decisions, in larger decisions about what we're going to do, and in making decisions about ethical dilemmas. The more people have a voice and sense of voice and choice in their work, the more satisfied in their job they are. And then the fact is that we all have resilience. We have these stressors, but we also have resilience. And here are some areas that can help us develop our resilience and increase it. We've talked a lot about vicarious traumatization. Another part of an agency implementing trauma-informed care is measures. In other words, using data to help us see if we are changing and help us see if it's making a difference. So some of the measures people use are things like decrease in restraints and seclusions, decrease in negative discharges, client staff injuries, turnover, increase in positive discharge, increase in job satisfaction, client satisfaction. And we also have a measure, the Arctic, which is an online measure that measures staff attitudes about trauma-informed care that can be used to show progress over time. And then when you find that you are making successes, publicize it, share it with all staff, share it with external stakeholders, with the board, with your funders, and that will also help the approach become more entrenched. Finding your measures, choosing them, and then celebrating the successes that you have. So even if we make our agencies much better, we are also embedded in a community. And what we come to understand is that trauma is at the center of involvement in many services, such as domestic violence programs, school problems, court, juvenile justice, substance abuse, mental health. All of them, trauma is at the center. So how can we make sure that no matter what door someone comes in, they get trauma screening and good trauma treatment? That's what we're trying to do. Even in terms of different diagnoses that we often see, trauma is at the heart of those diagnoses: conduct disorder, borderline personality disorder. It all starts with early childhood trauma. So whatever your diagnosis, are you getting screened for trauma? Are you getting good trauma treatment? So in agencies, lots of people interact with each other and with clients. The schools, the hospitals, the housing providers, the businesses, and of course, churches, synagogues, and other spiritual institutions, and then journalism and media. Of course, the state agencies of many kinds. So from this emerged the concept of a trauma-informed community, in which a community as a whole comes to understand about trauma, does a lot of trainings in a lot of places, talks about how they collaborate, how clients move between them, how to be more compassionate. I even heard of one town that had trauma-informed tax collection. I thought that would be interesting to find out what that is. The schools, of course, are a key factor, because if schools just try to discipline children into good behavior with no attention to what the children's lives are like, they can end up providing more trauma. So there's a huge trauma-informed schools movement and lots of success. There's a movie, Paper Tigers, which is a story of one town in Washington state, that Walla Walla to be exact, that makes a change at a special ed school, and how that change plays out. So if you're interested in this, there's lots of resources about trauma-informed schools. And there's even, as I said, trauma-informed communities, and there's lots of examples about that. There is a website called ACEs Connection, which gathers together all examples of people trying to reduce ACEs in the country, and it gives a lot of information about all these successful initiatives. Again, you have to think about measures, and what kind of measures are there for community efforts. Certainly client satisfaction, but what sort of community measures can you use, such as school dropouts, that apply to everyone? So we're doing our best work, and we're embedded in an agency, and that agency is embedded in a community. And the more this way of thinking can spread through all of those, the more effective our work with the clients is going to be.